Hi, and welcome to this module in our titration video series. I'm Tim, and I'm going to be joined by Remi in this session. And what we are going to be doing is deploying the two different types of connector appliances we have in titration. We're going to first start off with the titration edge appliance, in which we are going to talk about deploying ICE alongside that. And then we are also going to look at how we could deploy the titration data ingest appliance to ingest telemetry from ASAs. So Remi, we discussed in the module on the connector overview exactly what those connectors are, the different types, and exactly how many of them you can deploy. Let's get down to actually deploying those connectors and see how simple it is to do.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for you to prove me the simplicity of those things.
I promise you this is going to be very simple.
Okay,
so what we have up on the screen here is our connectors section of titration. We got to this part of the UI by coming to connectors and then choosing connectors again. Two connectors.
That sounds simple.
Sounds simple enough. Here we then have the different choices of connectors available to us. So some of them being for ingesting telemetry, some of them for ingesting flow data, or I should say flow stitching, others for bringing metadata in.
Okay.
So what we want to do is deploy the ICE connector in this case. So to start ingesting information from ICE, we will deploy the titration edge appliance. We'll configure that, and then we would be able to actually deploy the ICE connector on top of that edge appliance to receive that metadata.
But you know that ICE has to go on titration edge, right?
Yes.
If I didn't know what would I do actually? Because I want ICE. That's what I care about. I don't know what's in edge or ingest or whatever. How do I know that?
Yeah, so you don't even actually have to know that ahead of time. As we walk through this step-by-step process, you will see that it will firstly work out, is there an appliance deployed? If there isn't an appliance deployed, it will select the right type of appliance to deploy. It will show you the OVA that you need to download. It will create the configuration for you, and then it will walk you in a step-by-step basis how you need to actually deploy that appliance. So it really should be pretty simple to get started with this. So we're going to select the connector that we want. We don't really care if it's an edge-based connector or an ingest-based connector. We're just going to say that we want to connect to ICE.
Okay.
So we'll select ICE. And then we will come over to enable. We could read some information about exactly what ICE is going to do, but we will have another module in this video series that will discuss a little bit more about ICE and the zero trust story that titration is part of.
Wait, sorry Tim, but I just noticed something. You're running in Windows now?
Just for this session, we do happen to be inside a virtual machine that, yes, indeed is Windows. But it's Windows Server, so I'm okay with that. We can find a middle ground.
I see. So you're doing RDP, so if the screen is a bit slow as well, it's probably linked to that. Okay.
That's exactly why. So let's click Enable on this ICE instance here. And it's going to say to me, hey, look, you want to deploy ICE, but you need to deploy the right appliance. Would you like to deploy that appliance? And I think we're going to go ahead and say, yes, let's deploy that.
That would be better if we want
appliance.
to test it, right?
Yes, it does make sense to do that. So here you can see it's going to drop us on a step-by-step process. It is going to lead us all the way through to deploying that appliance. So you can see here that diagram of the connectivity model. And it's also going to recommend that we should go and download the OVA ahead of time from cisco.com.
So is there multiple options when I get to cisco.com, or is it like just one option to download?
There's going to be one option when it comes to the titration edge appliance, and that is going to be matching the version of software that your titration cluster is using.
Okay, so before clicking on that link, I need to make sure I read what's marked. It says titration edge on this one or here, and I need to see the version at the bottom, and when I have those two parameters, I can then go to cisco.com.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, because going to cisco.com and downloading software and uploading it to a data store and deploying that OVA is fun, sometimes.
Yeah, very fun. I mean, I imagine your weekends now.
Yeah, just like watching paint dry sometimes. So we've kind of bypassed that step of this demonstration, and we've already downloaded the right OVA, and we've uploaded that to our data store inside our hypervisor. In this case, it needs to be on top of vCenter.
Okay.
So we can pass through this step and move onwards to the VM configuration part. So here it is going to ask us some basic information about the appliance that we're going to deploy. We need to configure it. We need to give it an IP address. We need to give it some connectivity details so that it can reach out to the titration cluster.
I see. Okay.
So why we're doing this is because you do not actually need to configure that VM at all. all of the configuration is done through what we capture in this screen here.
Okay,
You just need to deploy that OVA.
Wait a minute. So either you invented data teleportation recently, or how are you going to get this config from here to the VM?
So what we're going to do is put this configuration into the system. The system is going to generate a configuration bundle. It's an ISO file. And then we're going to upload that ISO file to the data store on that vCenter and connect it to that VM.
Okay.
When that VM boots, it's going to read that ISO, which will have all of the recommended or all of the pertinent configuration parameters already loaded into that workload or into that ingest appliance or that edge appliance.
Oh, okay, I see. So you're typing stuff there, some magic machine again is going to go and generate an ISO file. That ISO file will be downloadable through this web page. I just need to drop it into some data store VMware can access and just load it up as a CD drive.
Correct.
Okay.
So we're going to put some of our basic connectivity details in here. It's obviously important to understand that whatever interface you configure on this VM, well, it needs connectivity. It needs connectivity to both the titration cluster that is going to speak to, and also any of the downstream alert destinations, or, for example, ICE is going to have connectivity to ICE to make sure that it can communicate to pull that data in.
So I see connectivity to ICE. I imagine as well, if I'm using, I don't know, I saw Slack in the list, I PagerDuty. Those things are off-prem, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're SaaS services.
Yeah.
So I need to make sure as well I don't mess up my proxy config if needed, or it has some form of internet access if I want to use them.
Yes.
Okay.
So just be aware of that as you go through and configure this. It's not a one-time thing. If you need to change the address or what have you, you can always do that later on down the line as well.
Okay.
So we put IP in here. We require only one IP address for the titration edge appliance. We put the gateway and the name server. There's other parameters that you could choose to configure, but in this case, we don't need to change any of those for our demo lab environment.
Just if you were using titration as a service with a proxy, just don't forget to tick that box, right?
Definitely make sure to tick that, and
Yeah.
if you have a proxy, make sure that you put it into the field there.
Yeah, that's the number one cause of failure on the deployment of your appliance when you're on-prem with tasks, is that you forget to tick the box.
Yeah. Always tick the box.
Tick the box.
So let's click next to move on here. And it is now going to generate that configuration bundle.
A few minutes, Tim?
It says a few minutes, but we always like to, under-promise and over-deliver. So
I see.
we can probably check the time clock. I don't think that was 1 minute.
Under-promise and over-deliver. That's going to be a unique name, Tim.
Over-promise and under-deliver, I think, is my real nickname. But here we go. So we have our configuration bundle ready. We can download that, and it's downloaded a copy of that ISO file.
So if you get good eyesight, it's right in the middle.
Yeah, right in the bottom there. But hopefully we can skip past that. So then we can click next, which is going to take us to deploying the virtual appliance. So there's a couple of steps that we will go through. Number one, which I already mentioned, is to download the OVA. We've already downloaded the OVA, we've uploaded that to vCenter, and we've actually deployed that VM. We haven't yet booted it, though. That's the most important thing to pay attention. Do not boot the VM. It's in bold there with an exclamation point at the end. You have to upload the configuration file before that VM will work.
So in short, you're telling everyone, make sure you read the docs.
Make sure you read the docs.
Okay, I see.
So once
another thing is that you see connect on power on.
Yes, that is another common mistake. You can upload the ISO file but forget to actually choose the connect on power. And if you do that, the VM's going to boot up, but it's not going to actually read that ISO file, and again, it won't reach out and connect. Now, all it takes to fix that is say connect on power on and reboot the VM.
Okay.
The VM itself is stateless. Every time it reboots, it brings itself back up again and reads from that ISO file.
Okay, cool.
So let's go over to our vSphere clients.
Okay.
And we can upload our Edge configuration bundle.
Okay.
Seems easy enough.
Seems even to work.
It worked. Uploaded. And then we can come over to our list of virtual machines, and we can see the titration Edge 3322. So we made sure to choose the right appliance with the right version of the appliance. And on the right side here, we can see some of the information about that VM, including the fact that it requires 8 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Well, it's not too bad. I mean, for modern systems, I mean, can you even buy a server with less than 64 gig of RAM nowadays?
I mean, that really is not a heavyweight appliance there.
Great.
So let's choose Edit Settings here, and we can go and add our ISO file. So we'll choose the ISO file. If it's going to want to specify one for me.
Expand.
Here we go.
I don't think he's a very big fan of the zoom.
Yes. We'll choose OK to that one. And then we'll make sure to click Connect at Power On.
I'm very proud of you, Tim. You read the doc. I think it's the first time ever you read the doc.
I often like to skip over it, but in this case, I think it's important. So we can choose Connect to Power On. We will press OK to that. And before we do that, let's just come back to the titration interface. So we've read all of these. We've said edit the VM settings, mounted the ISO. We haven't yet powered on the VM, and the reason being is that I want to move on to this next page quickly so that we can see.
Oh, it should be pending registration, right?
Yes.
Pending registration. Okay.
So it's waiting for that VM to boot up and connect into the titration cluster.
So the metric to see if the VM is actually connected and has connectivity is if pending registration is up and top, it's not working. It should show active if it's working.
Yep.
Okay, that's easy.
That's easy, and let's go ahead and do that. So we'll pop over to this one here. So now we're going to go ahead and actually boot the appliance since we've put the ISO configuration file in there, and we can see exactly what it does as it checks into that cluster. So we click play or power on, and then we can...
It's connected.
CD drive is connected. That's the most important part. We can bring up the actual console to see that, and we'll see the VM actually booting. The VM which has been hardened to ensure that when it's in a customer environment, there's nothing that they need to worry about. And at this point, it's going to be running through some internal configuration scripts.
So does that mean, because obviously I want to connect, I want to see stuff, I need to troubleshoot stuff. So do I have any kind of access to this VM?
You do have access to this. You can actually log in if you need to. We can log in with the root user. And it doesn't even require a password. And the reason being is that this is only available over this console. You can't connect to the shell of this virtual machine from any network.
Can I set a password if I want to?
Can you set a password?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's possible to set a password. You have access to the VM. It's still your virtual machine. We're going to communicate to that virtual machine over our control channel once we've initiated that.
Okay, so if I really want to, and I don't trust, because I don't trust my VMware admins, I can set a password just a normal Linux way if I wanted to.
Yes, you can. So that's connected, and we've booted up that virtual machine, and we can come back over to our virtual appliance over here. We can refresh this page and watch as it connects into the system. And it's changed from pending registration to active, which is exactly what we wanted to see, right?
Okay, so that's good.
That's good.
Green, good.
Green, it's checked in, it's registered, and now at this point, it's basically sat there dormant. It's not really doing anything. We've deployed that edge appliance, but it's not sending alerts anywhere. It's not ingesting any metadata from ICE. It's just waiting for you to choose what connector you want to enable. So I guess you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here, there is the button to enable a connector.
Just before we do so, I just noticed before we leave this page, a few options here. NTP especially is the one I was looking at. So is that good practice to actually configure NTP here?
I mean, I would say in all circumstances, it's a good practice to configure NTP, but it does make sense to configure NTP, especially if you want to make sure that your log files are in synchronization with the rest of the clocks in your environment. And that actually leads us to a couple of the other parameters here, some of the tabs that we can see. So we can see what exactly was configured on that VM. We can configure NTP. We can even actually collect logs from that VM. So if you don't want to keep going back into vCenter and executing commands via that console, you can extract those logs remotely via titration.
Easy.
Yeah. Obviously, the edge appliance still needs to be connected in and reachable to get those logs, though.
That's kind of a thought, yeah.
It seems like a given, but I thought it might be worth mentioning. So we have the connector, or I should say we have the appliance deployed, and we could choose to enable a connector right now. Now, in this particular module, we're not going to go through into configuring each one of the individual connectors, but just so that you can see what's available, here you can see that we have a couple of connectors to choose from. So we could switch on Slack, Kinesis, syslog, email, PagerDuty, or what we were talking about earlier. If we wanted to enable ICE, we would go ahead and choose that connector.
What happens? Can I click? What happens if I click? The word
World's going to end.
Okay.
No, actually, it's the same as when you deploy the appliance. So we can say enable that ICE connector, and it's going to now request that we actually start configuring some of the parameters of this ICE connector. So it's going to sit there waiting for us to say add instance config. It's also going to show us the state, exactly how that service is checking in. Is that connector still healthy? Is there anything that we need to grab from that connector or go and do any troubleshooting?
So a few things as well for everyone. It's absolutely normal that the connector shows in yellow for a little bit. So Tim just sent an instruction to the VM to go and download the ICE connector. So it takes a few minutes to come up. And when the connector will be there, the add instance config will get unlocked.
Yes.
So that's completely normal, not that
maybe we can even
call for help at that point.
Yeah, it's going to take a few minutes while it downloads that dynamically. And like we mentioned, we're not actually going to configure
I don't think we need
ICE.
to wait for that.
So we can pop on to moving and looking at the ingest appliances, which is actually going to be a pretty similar sort of workflow, but we can walk through that to get comfortable with it. So in this case, we also want to select the ASA.
Okay.
So the ASA, we're going to get some flow visibility, some NAT stitching from that ASA. So let's go ahead and click collect telemetry from that. Again, it's going to offer us a description about that particular connector and say, would you like to enable it?
So can I mess up and deploy an ASA connector on an HVM, sorry?
Knowing you, probably you could mess it up, but in this, because of the fact that this is all provided in a workflow, everything is guided, there's no way to deploy the wrong connector on the wrong appliance. In fact, we'll click enable for this, and despite the fact that we just deployed that edge appliance, it's still going to say, hey, look, you actually need to deploy the right appliance for ASA, which is ingest.
I see, okay.
So we can walk through that as well. Let's say, yes, we want to deploy this edge appliance or this ingest appliance, and it's going to show us the same sort of configuration steps. It's nothing out of the ordinary at this point. So again, we would need to go to cisco.com. We would choose the right OVA.
Titration data ingest, marked here, marked here.
Yep.
Okay.
Read it carefully, choose the right one.
Version.
Make sure the version matches. Just basic things, but it's useful to pay attention to that because it can catch you out. Now in this case, because we can deploy 1 through to 3 separate connectors per ingest, we're going to have a separate interface per connector.
Okay.
So unlike Edge, where we only required 1 interface, here we're going to ask for 3 interfaces.
Okay, that's how we get scale, I guess.
Yes, that's how you can continue to scale. And you can point, for example, different streams or different ingest sources to a particular interface.
Okay.
So
you need 3 IP address. They need to be contiguous, or they just need to be on the same subnet?
Just need to be on the same subnet.
Okay.
And
so
again,
actually, even now, seems like we can even have 3 different gateways now.
We could do.
I guess our recommendation is take 3 IPs, make them consecutive. Makes life simpler for everyone in the environment.
There we go. We'll put our 3 interfaces as the same, and we'll put our name server. So we have 120, 121, 122, all sharing the same gateway, using our name server that we've put in there. Again, the same parameters that we had. Do you want to change the host name? Do you want to add a search domain? And most importantly, do you want to use a HTTPS proxy to access your cluster? Yeah, it's exactly the same connectivity model as we saw with the Edge appliance.
So to recap, only difference between both of them, one has 3 IP address, one has 1, config exactly the same.
Simple.
Cool.
So we can go ahead and click next to move to the configuration bundle generation screen. Again,
a few minutes.
Still says it's going to take a few minutes. Maybe we should speak to the developers and say it's going to take a few seconds.
Yeah. I think we're in time warp mode.
Yeah. You know, it's going to be exactly my luck now where it's going to take a couple of minutes.
You're unlucky.
That was quick. That was quick again, so that's totally fine. We'll choose download configuration bundle, and we're going to go through the same process, which is to take that ISO file, the configuration bundle, find the virtual machine in our vCenter, which we previously deployed, attach it to the DVD drive or the CD drive, and boot that VM, making sure to connect at power on.
So you're still about following instructions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I promise you, I always follow your instructions.
Yes, I would doubt this comment.
So we can come over to data store and upload the data ingest ISO. There we go, nice and speedy.
Perfect.
We'll also come back to virtual machine list here. We'll choose the data ingest virtual machine. Same specs, 8 CPUs, 8 gigabytes of RAM.
3 interfaces though.
3 interfaces. Remember we
had
configured.
one before.
We had one before. In this case, we had 3 interfaces to configure. Each one sits on a different network adapter on that virtual machine.
Do I have to configure those 3 adapters, by the way, or is it the OVA that just populates those 3 for me?
So when you deploy the OVA, all of this is going to be populated as is.
Okay.
So you don't need to choose the interfaces. You will need to choose exactly what port group that they are sitting in inside vCenter. Just make sure that it has connectivity, obviously.
So if I recap, what I see here is that if I'm the system admin, I have to deploy this. I just get an OVA file, I deploy the OVA file. There is no questions, no prompt asked. I give him the ISO file. He attaches the ISO file to the image. Then he just makes sure it's connected startup, and then hits start, and then from there I take over.
That's it.
Perfect.
So
Simple.
let's come and do that. We will find a CD/DVD drive. We will choose data store ISO file. We will choose the ingest one, being careful.
There.
We will say OK to that. And we'll make sure to say connect at power on. Choose OK. I'll just make sure that it's connected power on, not connected. Yep.
Perfect.
Press OK. And again, we will just hit the start button to get that machine loaded.
Checked out all the doc fine, followed every step.
Followed every step, I promise.
Great.
We'll load up the console. Again, it's based on CentOS, hardened appliance, removed all services that are unnecessary, nothing that's running on there apart from those connectors. Same concept where you have the root login, but only through the console as well.
So the base image of both are actually the same. We package them as different appliances for simplicity, but actually if you were to look at the content OS-wise,
Yes.
they're identical.
Exactly the same hardened OS that we use.
Perfect. That means if I do a security audit and I have my security team that have to look at it, if they look out at one image, they're actually looking at all images.
Yep.
Simple, less work.
Yeah, less work is good. So we can move on past the configuration bundle screen. We followed these steps already, so we've downloaded the OVA, we've taken the configuration file, applied that to the virtual machine, connected it at power on, booted the machine, and we can see it's running, and finally it will come done. And it's also going to be waiting for the registration to go through. It might just take a few minutes for that virtual machine to completely load and configure itself. And then at that point, we're going to be able to start deploying some more connectors as well.
I'm curious while we're waiting, should we just have a quick look at ICE?
Let's go take a look and see if that ICE one has popped up. So here we can now go to our virtual appliances. Because we have our Edge appliance and we have our ingest appliance already configured, we don't need to go back via the connectors screen. And we can see here that we will have the data ingest and the Edge. So if we come look at Edge, we'll see that ICE is there.
Ah, I saw green.
Everything is green.
Green is good.
Green's good.
Perfect. And now my only steps, if I was really configuring an ICE appliance, I just click Add Instance Config, I fill in my fields,
Yes.
and so on. Do you mind just clicking so we can just show the kind of what it looks like? So you see, I mean, nothing fancy, right? It's just follow the fields, copy paste, view, verify, and save config. Done.
Done.
So perfect.
And we will approach that in another module where we'll look at exactly what you can do with ICE and the different ways that we can use that for visibility and enforcement.
Okay.
Okay, so now we could go back and take a look at that ingest appliance and see if it's registered in with the Tetration cluster. So I'll move over to my virtual appliances over here on the left-hand side, choose virtual appliances, and there we can see the data ingest is showing itself as active.
Okay.
Let's just open that up. Exactly the same screen as we saw on the Edge appliance. It shows that it's checked in, and it's going to give us those options to look at the VM configuration, configure NTP if we want to, which we would also recommend that you do, and pull logs from that machine as well if you need to do some troubleshooting.
That sounds easy.
Yep.
Enabling a connector now?
just as easy it was for the Edge appliance, although noting that you may only deploy a maximum of 3 connectors per ingest.
Okay, that's good to know.
So now we can see the connectors that we could choose.
Pretty nice list.
Yeah, good list of connectors there. AWS, AnyConnect, and in this case, we're going to choose ASA that we would like to enable. So let's just choose ASA as a connector, enable that selected connector, and it's going to go through that same process as we saw on ICE, where it will download the right connector to that ingest appliance, configure it, and get it started, and give you some options about exactly what you need to do.
Sounds good. So when I saw that earlier, when you see the little kind of curly sign that goes together, that means deployment in progress. When you see the green check mark, deployment done.
Deployment done.
Okay. So I see that, I'm just waiting, and then I just refresh the page, the config will show up.
That's it. That's all you need to do. And you can keep repeating that for as many ingest connectors as you would like. Clearly, once you get to 3, just deploy a new appliance. Keep on scaling out if you need to bring that much data into the system.
Sounds good. That didn't seem too hard.
That was pretty reasonable, right? To configure Edge and ingest all in the space of less than 30 minutes. So
very nice.
Well, thank you for joining us in this session on titration connectors. If you would like more information about titration, please visit cisco.com/go/titration.